The Boston Bruins fell behind in their opening round playoff series 2-0, but they have rallied to even things up at 2-2. Ian McLaren of Locked On Boston Bruins joins us to break down what's been different for the Bruins at home and their prospects for the rest of the playoffs. All that coming up on this episode of the Locked On NHL Podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Locked On NHL Podcast, and thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the show from Locked On Boston Bruins, Ian McLaren. And Ian, your team on the comeback trail here, series even at 2 apiece, and they did it in pretty dramatic fashion today.
Yes. Right before the puck dropped, we found out that Charlie McAvoy, who is arguably as important to the Bruins as any other player, was placed in COVID-19 protocol. So he, joined by Hampus Lindholm, who is already out of the lineup with an upper body injury suffered early in the series, calling on some reinforcements on the blue line, which isn't especially deep. And, once the Carolina Hurricanes took a 1-0 lead, it really seemed as though it was going to go the way we expected, that, the Hurricanes would take advantage of these injuries, the lack of depth on the defense, and kind of run around the Bruins. But Patrice Bergeron scored late in the first to tie things up. The Hurricanes scored very early in the second again, and then we're like, here we go. But then the Bruins scored 4 straight goals, including 2 on the power play, which has been an issue for this team as of late. And they were able to pull off the victory in front of a very pumped up home crowd, and it's now a best 2 out of 3.
Yeah, and look, the game was not without its controversies. Why don't you talk a little bit about what happened during the game?
Yeah, there was a couple, really. There was a Jake DeBrusk goal scored late in the second period on the power play. Carolina Hurricanes head coach Rod Brind'Amour challenged for goaltender interference. The call on the ice was upheld. It was a good goal, 2-2. And of course, if you challenge and it's not successful, you go back on the power play. And 44 seconds into the third period, it was Brad Marchand who scored his first of 2 on the afternoon to give the Bruins a 3-2 lead that they would not give up. So that was one area of controversy. Another was not really controversy, but just kind of heightened tensions between Brad Marchand and Carolina Hurricanes defenseman Tony DeAngelo. Those guys got into it quite often. Some words were exchanged. I think it was at the end of the first period, and if you're a lip reader, you could see Marchand kind of pointing back to DeAngelo's somewhat checkered history as a member of the New York Rangers, or a social media presence as well. And those two just kept getting into it to the point where Brad Marchand scores the empty net goal to make it 5-2, and DeAngelo just literally throws his stick towards, not at Marchand per se, but towards the puck, which should have warranted a misconduct, I would think. Might warrant a fine or some verbal warning at the very least. But those guys definitely not fans of each other, and really getting into it to the delight of the TD Garden crowd for sure.
How do you think this personal rivalry, for lack of a nicer way to put it, is going to manifest itself going forward?
I mean, ideally for the Bruins, it will kind of get D'Angelo off his game, get the Hurricanes as a whole. They seemed a bit rattled towards the end of this game. D'Angelo, I mean, you can't argue that he's a very talented defenseman, but at the same time, it's not unheard of that he can make some questionable decisions, both on and off the ice. So hopefully the Bruins can stay in his head, stay in the Hurricanes' heads, and keep things going in Carolina, where they were not successful at all in the first two games of the season or of the series, and dating back to the regular season. Brad Marchand, he came in very cold. I think he had one empty net goal over the last 14 games of the season or something like that. And heading into Sunday night's slate of games, Marchand now leads the postseason with 9 points. He had a 5-point afternoon. He's now 2 ahead of Cale Makar for the time being anyways. So he's coming alive at the right time. The crowd and the team really rallied around Patrice Bergeron as well. He took a high stick to the eye, or close to the eye, near the end of the second period. Was dangerously close to his eye, and he was able to come back for the start of the third, and that, of course, just rallied the troops as well. So those main guys, Bergeron, Marchand, coming through and leading the way for the Bruins here on Sunday afternoon.
Talk to me a little bit about Jeremy Swayman and what a difference he made since taking over in goal.
Yeah, I don't want to blame games 1 and 2 on Linus Ullmark, and certainly head coach Bruce Cassidy didn't go that far either. But there was kind of a lack of those quote unquote timely saves, and Jeremy Swayman, he came in with only 3 shots of playoff experience on him, relieving Tuukka Rask last year. Made his 2 first starts, allowed only 4 goals on 53 shots for a .925 save percentage in those 2 starts, games 3 and 4. And he made those timely saves that Bruce Cassidy was looking for, thwarting a very talented Hurricanes offense, making some big saves on the penalty kill, getting a lot of help from guys in front of him. Derek Forbort has been a shot blocking machine over the past couple games, and he's really stepped up for the Bruins defense. So I think it's partly Swayman coming in with some composure. He's a very talented rookie, but I also think the Bruins recognized after games 1 and 2 that they needed to help their goaltender a lot more, no matter who it was. And they have, done that to support Jeremy Swayman over the past couple games, and that's been a big reason why they've won as well.
You mentioned it's now a best-of-3 series. 2 of those 3 games will be in Carolina. What is the key for the Bruins going forward if they're going to continue to be successful in this series?
Yeah, I think the key will be to there's a couple things. Ideally, you'd like to score first. I don't think they've scored first in any of the 4 games so far. So scoring first in Game 5, getting the crowd out of it as quickly as possible would be huge. And special teams has really been a big key in this series as well. Carolina has the top-ranked power or penalty kill in the league. If the Bruins can stay out of the box, limit Carolina's opportunities, and they've slowly been able to break through against Carolina's penalty kill. I think they have 4 power play goals in games 3 and 4 combined. So if they can continue to play well 5-on-5, which they did in Carolina in games 1 and 2, limit those power play opportunities for the Hurricanes, and hopefully either Hampus Lindholm or Charlie McAvoy will be available at least for Game 6. Bruins will have to win at least 1 game on the road hopefully it's Game 5, so they can try to finish things off in Game 6 back on home ice later this week.
Ian, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find you on social media and where they could find the podcast?
Absolutely. The podcast available wherever you get podcasts, so whatever app you use, search up Locked On Boston Bruins. You can subscribe there. The podcast is on Twitter at Locked NHL Bruins. Same on Instagram, and people can find me at Ian C. McLaren.
All right, Ian, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks so much, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball, and the Stanley Cup Playoffs. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts.